Hello, I'm Janine Turner, founder of Constituting America. Welcome to our annual 90-day study entitled 90 plus 90 equals 180. History holds the key to the future. This year's study is entitled The Genius of America, A Journey into Our Republic, a study on Alexis De Tocqueville's Democracy in America. This is a quote from Alexis De Tocqueville. What is new in the history of societies is to see a great people, warned by its legislatures that the wheels of government are stopping, turn its regard upon itself without haste and without fear, sound the depth of the ill, contain itself for 2 entire years in order to discover the remedy at leisure, and when the remedy is pointed out, submit voluntarily to it without it costing humanity 1 tear or a drop of blood. Alexis de Tocqueville. This essay is entitled On the Federal Constitution, Volume 1, Part 1, Chapter 8, Subchapters 1 through 4 of Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. Our guest essayist is Robert Lowry Clinton. After a brilliant introduction expounding the rise of democratic inclinations in Europe during the centuries leading up to the colonization of America, followed by 7 chapters exploring socio-economic, geographical, cultural, and political conditions on this side of the Atlantic, de Tocqueville turns to a peremptory discussion of the federal Constitution in Chapter 8. Beginning with the history of the Constitution's emergence out of the earlier Articles of Confederation, de Tocqueville emphasizes the colonists' strong connections to England before the War of Independence, noting the sharing of religion, language, mores, and laws among the Americans and the English. This sharing, however, was not enough to prevent the War of Independence. During the war and its immediate aftermath, the Americans were governed by the Articles, written in 1778 and adopted in 1781, which repudiated a complete union in favor of a confederation of individual states. De Tocqueville explains that once the war commenced, the principle of union prevailed anyway in the face of a common enemy. However, when the public danger subsided, states resumed their original and entire sovereignty. The states disunited proved disastrous, exposing the states to dangers both foreign and domestic. Before long, Congress recognized its impotence and called for a convention to address the problems and revise the Articles. The quote-unquote revision, thus produced by the Convention of 1787, turned out to be a complete replacement of the Articles, resulting in our present written Constitution. De Tocqueville extols the greatness of the American founders in heeding the warning of the dangers of disunity, acting with a resolve yet patience in devising a remedy, and accepting the remedy, though controversial, without bloodshed. Quote, what is new in the history of societies is to see a great people, warned by its legislatures that the wheels of government are stopping, turn its regard upon itself without haste and without fear, sound the depth of the ill, contain itself for 2 years in order to discover the remedy at leisure, and when the remedy is pointed out, submit voluntarily to it without costing humanity 1 tear or drop of blood. End quote. After a brief comparison of the American and French revolutions, attending to the most obvious differences between the 2 wars, de Tocqueville proceeds to a summary of the federal Constitution, stressing the crucial distinction between the character of the powers granted to the nation and those left to the states. Since the goal of the nation is to respond to a, quote, few great general needs, end quote, its powers are, quote, simple and easy enough to define, end quote. Since the goals of the states are, quote, multiple and complicated, end quote, thus retaining, quote, the common rule, end quote, their prerogatives cannot be easily defined. De Tocqueville perceives the inevitability of conflict between state and national governments and suggests that the Supreme Court was created in part to avoid having such disputes left to individual state courts. Relying heavily on the Federalist, de Tocqueville examines more closely some of the intricacies presented by this constitutional system. For example, some national powers are made exclusive, others not. Where national power is not exclusive, states can govern freely, subject to the intervention of courts if they abuse their freedom and, quote, compromise the security of the entire union, end quote. Thus, the federal constitution establishes both a republic and a confederation, both federal and confederal. De Tocqueville closes his section on federal prerogatives by giving some examples suggesting that on some points, an example, having a single national court to interpret the law and a single legislature to impose taxes on everyone, and commercial regulations on the states. The American Union is more centralized in some ways than some European monarchies. Though this seems a bit of a stretch, maybe not. Perhaps de Tocqueville was echoing the earlier fears of the anti-federalist, Brutus, when he suggests in the one-sentence section that follows, entitled Federal Powers, that it might be difficult to confine the national government to the exercise of its delegated powers. In sum, de Tocqueville's preliminary remarks on the Constitution are generally sound and most helpful in drawing attention to the most important feature and problem of the constitutional order it established, the dual sovereignty embodied in the federal system. And in the last analysis, his cautionary suggestion about the difficulty of preventing future concentration of power in the national government would prove fully justified. This essay was written by Robert Lowry Clinton. Robert Lowry Clinton is Professor Emeritus at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. He is the author of Marbury versus Madison and Judicial Review, God and the Man in the Law, The Foundations of Anglo-American Constitutionalism, and numerous articles in academic and popular publications.